again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Terry scores! Tory Terry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Terry and the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Terry!
All right, well, that did not last very long at all. The Ducks follow up what was, again, they probably should have won in a 1-0 victory over the Vancouver Canucks 2 days ago with the typical Anaheim Ducks performance we're used to. Got some news to cover before we get into everything because, as you can tell, I am not joined by Jason or Pat on this show. I'm joined by Ciara from Pucks of a Feather. Thank you for coming on, Ciara. It's a big help today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, you didn't get to come on and catch the Ducks win, unfortunately, but they did play okay in this game. You know, the scoreline doesn't do it justice. They end up losing 3-0 to the Boston Bruins, but it's one of those games lately where, you know, the Ducks did have their chances, and maybe they got a little bit unlucky. It doesn't feel as bad as 3-0.
That's true.
And so we go into it. There's a couple pre-game notes to hit on. Kevin Boyle gets to start again. Yaroslav Halak is in for Boston. Troy Terry gets the call-up, which was a bit surprising because we've heard from Bob Murray so far this season that he wasn't interested in bringing these guys up, and Adam Cracknell's the guy to get sent down. Were you surprised to see that Troy Terry ended up getting the call-up despite how well San Diego's been playing?
Honestly, I really was. You know, I kind of want those guys to stay down in San Diego because, I mean, the Ducks are tanking, so why bring up guys who are going to help you when you want to tank to get a good draft pick? So
yeah, that's it's a bit interesting the way they went, and I get it. You know, Nick Ritchie's out with an illness, so that makes sense. The Brian Gibbons experiment, if you will, seems like it's pretty much over as he was placed on waivers earlier today. So they needed to make some kind of roster moves and bring somebody up. I don't know if it's long-term. We'll see. Nick Ritchie hopefully will be back soon. But it is nice to see him get called up. The only other scratch today was Welinski was also scratched again. So that meant we got to see the infamous pairing of Fowler and Delzato and Magna and Montour, which was less than stellar in the game against the Vancouver Canucks. How did you feel going into the lineup? Because nothing really changed. The only big difference this time was that instead of Nick Ritchie with Henrique and Sprong, it was Troy Terry.
Oh, that is a good question. You know, it's kind of like interesting to see Bob Murray behind the bench and the way that he's doing things. And I mean, it kind of worked out for him during the last game, but at the same time, they weren't playing very well. So it doesn't surprise me that the game ended the way it did tonight.
Yeah, it really wasn't. I mean, this is what you kind of expect, the fact that Boston has been so good over the last few games. And generally, they get some pretty good goaltending from both Yaroslav Halak and Tuukka Rask this year. So that, coupled with the fact that the Ducks just can't buy goals in any game they play. I mean, you look at the fact that they do have 3 wins in their last 22 games, and the most recent one was a scrape-out 1-0 win over the Vancouver Canucks. So it's been a struggle for this team all year. And that kind of leads us into the first period, where the very first important play, I guess you could say, in this game was the first goal of the game for the Boston Bruins, where this is a tough one for Kevin Boyle because he was, again, pretty good tonight. And this one is one that you look at it after the play and you think there's not much he can do. It's a one-timer from Brendan Carlo that gets deflected in front by Achari and ends up being 1-0 Bruins. But, you know, not really fair if you're going to put the blame on Kevin Boyle on that one.
Yeah. You know, the Ducks have really been in it this season because of their goaltending. I mean, aside from Chad Johnson. So, I mean, goaltenders aren't going to get everything, so you can't really blame him for that one.
No, yeah. Let's not talk about Chad Johnson for as long as we can because it's been tough, and we're all coming off a high in the last game with the way Kevin Boyle played and the fact that he ends up getting a 35-save shutout in his debut. Nothing against him in this game because he did have another strong performance. But This first period, the Ducks didn't get a ton of chances, but it was actually one of the better first periods or periods in general that they've had in a while because it was a lot of back and forth. Halak had to make a couple great saves, the first one of which where Sprong made a good pass over to Adam Henrique, and Halak had to be in a good position. And then Max Jones continued his great start since getting a call-up and got a breakaway where he kind of just couldn't get the shot off, and then Perry's rebound ended up getting saved by Halak. What has impressed you the most about Max Jones since getting called up? Because I think a lot of people have been able to notice him in his second stint with the Ducks this year.
Well, definitely it's been nice seeing him because, at the beginning of the season he was injured, so he wasn't able to come play with the rest of the guys. So it's definitely just been nice to see that, his development wasn't hurt from being out with an injury,
Yeah, it's a tough injury to come back from because he had, I believe it was a thumb injury, and he had to end up getting surgery. So it's just kind of a tough one to have to be able to come back from middle of the season and get things going. And he had a lot of time to adjust in San Diego, and then he had the first call-up where I think a lot of people thought he was impressive, but just couldn't buy a goal, and comes up this time and I think almost looks better than the first time since coming up. And again, he's had some great chances. He had a really good chance on what was, I think, one of the best shifts I've seen from any Ducks player this season in the game against Vancouver. And then this one gets a breakaway and just lacks a little bit of finish it would have taken to get the goal on this one. But easily, I think he's been one of the best players for the Ducks over the last 2 games.
Mm-hmm. You can definitely tell that he's hungry and that he wants to be in the NHL. So it's really nice to see that he has that drive and that dedication.
Yeah, and the thing with him as well is that line, surprisingly, has been one of the Ducks' better lines, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Ryan Kesler now has been taken away from being the shutdown guy for the Ducks, and the new shutdown line seems to be Grant, Shore, and Silverberg because they were matched against Brad Marchand in this game, and they were matched against the top line in Vancouver as well. So I think that's a little bit of a testament to Bob Murray realizing that Ryan Kesler isn't the guy that he used to be now, and the fact that they're just kind of given a little bit better of a matchup, and being able to play with an energy guy like Max Jones has allowed that line to be better than any line Ryan Kessler's been on this year.
Mm-hmm. I kind of wish I knew what was going through Kessler's head because I'm sure it's not fun being demoted to the 4th line. So.
No, it is, and for sure, and he, his minutes are going down, but I'm sure it's maybe he won't admit it, but I think it's a slight relief for that guy as well because it's been such a tough year for him. He's at this point now, you just know the injury is something he's probably never going to come back from, and I think taking that responsibility, as much as he relishes it and loves being able to match up against the opposing team's top players. It's got to be a relief that he doesn't have to go out there and know, I got to go against Bergeron and Marchand, or I got to go out there against Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser or whoever, and now it's somebody else's responsibility, and he just kind of gets to, I don't want to say relax out there, but he's not relied upon as much as he used to be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For the new shutdown line, though, they did a relatively good job in this game. The Ducks come out of the first period and played a pretty good first period, which feels weird to say that the way they've started games recently. Didn't have a great period against Vancouver, but they ended up escaping that. Tied at 0 after the first. Actually, I think they led 1-0 after the first against Vancouver, and they escaped this one. Yes, they're down 1-0, but shots were 11-8, and scoring chances were fairly even. Were you a little bit surprised with the way they started that first? And I guess, I don't want to say impressed, but at least not disappointed compared to how they had started first periods in the last few games?
I mean, like you said, you can't really be impressed, but it was just kind of a relief, to see that, at least they're trying. So I can't be upset with them for trying, even though they lost. Yeah,
you at least the effort seems like it was there this game, which is something Bob Murray's been preaching since coming back, is he wants to see the compete level rise. And the goal scoring is always going to be a problem no matter what with the compete level this year. The Ducks just don't have it in them to be a team that is going to score a lot of goals. And it is depressing when they do get shut out again, but I think they looked better, especially against a very good team. And you saw some of that moving into the second as well, because right off the bat, Raquel made a beautiful move and a drop pass over to Corey Perry, who has been snake-bitten in his own right since coming back from injury, and that was to be expected because it's never easy to come back in the middle of the season, and he just doesn't have that finishing ability, it seems like, right now, because he threw it right into Jaroslav Halak's glove. But good signs nonetheless, right? I mean, good signs that this line is generating some offense.
Definitely.
And the only problem is that seemed to be it for the offense for the beginning part of this period, because David Krejci on the power play, this was probably the big first mistake for Kevin Boyle since coming up with the Ducks. He overcommits pretty badly, and David Krejci makes him look silly and just walks right around him and feeds the puck right across the crease to Jake DeBrusk for a tap-in. A tough one for Kevin Boyle. It's to be expected at this point, but this is one he probably should have played better, right?
Definitely. Couldn't agree more.
And the Ducks do get a couple power play chances in this game. The interesting thing, I think, is the fact that we get to see Jones and Terry getting power play time, which is nice to see. We've seen them get that before, and obviously with guys out with injury, of course, Andre Kasha is out for the rest of the season, and Nick Ritchie has an illness at this point. But still, there's some very good players. You would assume Raquel Getzlaf Perry would get power play time, as well as Henrique Sprong and Silverberg, but somehow they're still able to manage to fit Jones and Terry in there, which is nice because they were looking pretty good on the power play.
Yeah, I was reading some tweets during the game, and a lot of people were excited to see them out there, especially since they've been so good down in San Diego on the power play.
Yeah, I think that chemistry comes into it a little bit as well, and that's what we saw earlier this year. They weren't put up together in a line this time, but earlier when they got called up at the same time, they were put together with Derek Grant, and it seems like that chemistry is still a little bit there, and Jones in particular has been extremely noticeable. He probably could have had 2 goals at least in this game because of the chances that he was getting. But the Ducks, despite, as we said, playing well, still shooting the Bruins after the second 22-17, they just couldn't get it going. They couldn't get any really high danger offensive chances. They go down into the third period down 2-0. And I think the problem here is you go out into the third, and there really wasn't much fight. And this is what we've seen from this Ducks team this year when they're trailing, especially going into the third period. Teams just are able to kind of set up shop or park the bus, if you will, and the Ducks just don't really generate a lot of offense when they're down 1, 2, 3 goals going into the third period. They're no longer the comeback kids we're used to.
Yep, that's definitely true, and it's kind of sad because, we've been so spoiled with hockey in Anaheim over the past few years that it's difficult to see this team not being at a compete level.
Yeah, it's something that Randy Carlyle stressed before he ended up get firing, and something that Bob Murray has stressed recently in a lot of his comments is compete level. And the players don't seem to agree with it, which I understand because nobody wants to get called out for not trying hard enough. And it's tough. You want to think they are trying hard enough, and when you hear the players come out and say that's not true and they're upset about it, then it's understandable. But I think the problem is when you look at the product on the ice and you just see a lot of defensive mishaps, especially in the games prior to these two, where guys are just left wide open, and the fact that the Ducks just can't really generate any offensive chances, really, that it's hard not to think that the compete level is low.
Yeah.
So we had some interesting news for the postgame. Some different things coming out that I guess are positives for the Ducks, especially the big one I think is the Kevin Waugh fan club is very happy at this point to hear that. We haven't heard any news on him all season, and then we get this little tidbit earlier today and yesterday that he's practicing with the team. No real update on if he's close, but I think just the fact he's skating and practicing with the team doesn't mean he's going to play with the Ducks, but even if he's healthy enough to go back down to San Diego, it's going to be great for him because it's been a long year trying to come back for injury.
Yeah, I definitely think that it'll be a good thing for him because, it's never fun being out with an injury. I mean, Tory Terry just went through it, and I'm sure it's nice to kind of get back to the game you love and be able to play again. Yeah,
for sure. And where do you think Kevin Waugh should go? Because this kind of goes into the stuff, a couple of the comments we have on Jones and Terry after this. But do you think if Kevin Waugh is ready to go before the end of the season and the Ducks are still in the position they are, so outside the playoffs, would you like to see him get another shot with the Ducks and see what he can do, or is it better served for him to go down to San Diego and not jump right into the NHL after coming back from a long injury?
I mean, I don't really see the point of him jumping into the NHL because, I mean, the Ducks are kind of in a position where we know they're not going to make the playoffs. We know they're probably going to lose the majority of the rest of their games. So why not give him the opportunity to play with a team that's going to win?
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's the same thing we kind of see with Tory Terry and Max Jones, and moves into the second topic we hear is how do you feel about them getting called up and ultimately hurting San Diego, at least in the short term? We don't know how long they're going to be up here for, but how do you feel about that? Would you rather see them get some more time in San Diego, or if Jones continues playing the way he is and if Terry can step it up, is it better served for them getting top 6 minutes in the NHL?
I'm saying this out of selfish reasons because I'm going to go see the Gulls play the Roadrunners in April. So I want them to go back to San Diego so I can see them play. Because I was considering going to the Ducks game in March in Phoenix. But I don't know if I want to spend the money and the time driving down there just to watch them probably lose. But honestly, I think that San Diego's best chance at winning is if Terry and Jones are in their lineup. Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, those are arguably two of the best guys down there. The one guy we haven't seen got called up in a long time, especially since his first sent down to San Diego, is Sam Steele. And it almost feels like the hype a bit on Sam Steele, and we've talked about it on this podcast before, has died down a bit. It was major Sam Steele hype warranted after his 130-plus point season with Regina a couple of years ago, and then followed it up with a World Junior appearance where he played really well. And now he's made his pro debut, and I don't want to say he's played bad because it's hard to transition to the NHL as a center, and he played pretty well when the Ducks needed to play him this year because of injuries. But it's interesting to see that he is still the guy that has not come back up yet. It's been Max Jones now with 2 stints. It's been Tory Terry with, I believe now this is his 3rd stint coming up with the Ducks. And Sam Steele is still in San Diego. And I know you can't keep calling them up, and Ducks are a little bit deeper at center with picking up Grant, still having Henrique, Kessler, and Getzlaf. But would you like to see maybe Sam Steele get one more shot before the end of the season? Or is it better, again, the same sense of Jones and Terry, just to see him stay in San Diego, get used to the pro game, and maybe get a chance next year?
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that they believe that Sam Steele is the future of this team and that he's probably going to take over Ryan Getzlaf's spot when Getzlaf retires. I am of the opinion that that's not going to happen. I think he is a little overhyped, though I do think he's still a great player. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like the Ducks are kind of set right now with their centers, so I don't really see a point in bringing him up, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes sense. I feel like a lot of people kind of think that as well, as you've got all these guys that you really can't move. I mean, I guess you could argue you could move Adam Henrique, but Getzlaf is going to be here. Ryan Kessler is still going to be a part of this lineup. They're not moving him out, especially when he's got a $7 million contract that nobody's going to take on. And Derek Grant has been pretty good since coming back from Pittsburgh this year. So trying to fit Sam Steele on on the wing, or moving one of those guys to the lane to the wing to play him on the 4th line, it really wouldn't make too much sense at this time. And I get that the hype is still there for a lot of people. Like you said, there are some people that believe that Sam Steele is still going to be the top line center of the future, and I think he has the potential to do that, but that's the very highest potential of his ceiling. He would have to check every single box and make every single type of development and stride and improvement for him to get to that point. I think realistically what you see from Sam Steele, and I think it's the same thing you were saying, is that you maybe get another Adam Henrique type of thing. And not the exact same type of player, but production-wise, you get like a 40, 50-point center, which late in the first round is not bad. And the Ducks are going to need that guy eventually anyway. And hopefully they get Jack Hughes this offseason, and then you can go a 1-2 for the next 10 years of Hughes and Steele down the center.
Yeah, that would be like a dream.
Yeah, exactly. And you just recently wrote an article 3 hours ago, to be exact, that got published. The 5 reasons Anaheim Ducks fans can look forward to the offseason. If you guys want to check it out, it's over at pucksurfeather.com right now. But the first thing you kind of brought up was the draft. And I think that is on everybody's mind this year and who the Ducks could get. And Jack Hughes' name, of course, came up, but so did a couple other guys that are going to be at the top of the draft in Kaapo Kakko and Kirby Dach. Kind of explain why you picked these guys. I mean, I think Hughes and Kakko are obvious. Kirby Dach, as you pointed out, is being compared to Ryan Getzlaf for good reason. He's a big center playmaker from the WHL where Ryan Getzlaf came from, right-handed. I mean, he pretty much is a carbon copy of Ryan Getzlaf in every facet of his game. What are you looking forward to most on the draft side? Do you think the Ducks have what it takes to complete the tank and get Jack Hughes? Or are you excited with all the other guys you listed here as a possibility?
Well, honestly, I think that the guys who are projected to go in the top 5 are guys that we can really look forward to drafting. I think whatever teams draft them are going to be very lucky to have them. But I definitely think, if the Ducks don't get the first pick, I think they're going to be happy with whoever they draft.
Yeah, it's generally, at least at the top half, and for forwards, the top 12 to 15 is where you're going to get probably a first-line talent, if not maybe a second-line guy, depending. Some of these guys aren't going to pan out as projected, but the top end of the draft, like you put in your article, you've got Jack Hughes, you've got Kaapo Kakko, you've got Kirby Dach, Dylan Cousins. There's a lot of guys, and I think the thing that a lot of Ducks fans can look forward to this year is a lot of the guys in that top 7 to 10 are centers, which is, if you're going to look at anything and you want to get a top-line forward right now, the Ducks really need to bring a center into the fold where 3 years down the road, Ryan Getzlaf's contract's going to expire. They're probably going to re-sign him, but he's not going to be as effective, and they're going to need that franchise guy. And obviously, Jack Hughes is everybody's target, possibly the best American forward to come out since Austin Matthews. There's potential that he could even be better than Austin Matthews. I know it's a lot of speculation at this point because he still is a rookie. He still hasn't even made his way to the NHL. He still has to get drafted. Everything has to work out. But I mean, a lot of people hate Ducks fans already and hate the Ducks in general. I imagine the Ducks are bad for 1 year and they land Jack Hughes. The hate will be unreal if they do that.
Oh, goodness. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be ridiculous. But that's not the only changes that will happen with the Ducks. And as you point out in the second part, the Ducks are going to be getting a new head coach. And there's a lot of speculation on who it could be. The easy and likely suggestion is it's going to be Dallas Eakins. But there are some other candidates that are out there. Ricard Gromberg is a guy that we've mentioned before. And Sheldon Keefe, coming out of the Toronto Marlies system, is a guy that they could mention. If you had to pick the guy you think is likely going to get the job and then the guy you want to get the job, who would that be?
Well, from the way that things have sounded, I think Dallas Eakins is going to get the job. I mean, there is a lot of criticism towards him because of how things ended in Edmonton, but you can't really blame him for that one because he didn't have much to work with.
No, they were bad.
But honestly, I'd be happy with any of them. All of them are better than Randy Carlyle by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, pretty much anybody they bring in, and to me, those are. If I had to pick 3 guys, or even if I tried to extend it to more, it always just comes back to those 3 names for me are just so much above the other guys available, whether it's Dan Bilesma, Joe Quenneville, or whoever else is available. There's plenty of names that will be available, and probably more will come up when teams decide to either fire their coach or move on, and some of those guys will become available. But I just think Dallas Eakins just makes sense because he's been around the system, and I still think he deserves another shot. Agreed. To go a full season. It would have been very difficult to watch him again get thrust into an impossible situation with how bad the Ducks are and be like, here, fix this. Because They did that to him in Edmonton, and now that kind of hangs over him a bit, where people aren't sure if he's going to be a good coach or not, but you could have thrown anybody into that situation in Edmonton. It could have been Mike Babcock, could have been Joel Quenneville. Nobody was turning that ship around and how bad they were when Dallas Eakins took over.
Yeah, I would feel bad for him if they kind of thrust him in this season. Man, that would be a horrible situation to be in. So I was kind of a little relieved when I heard that Bob Murray was stepping in, but at the same time, I was like, what?
Yeah, and I think like a lot of people in our chat are bringing up that the problem with Dallas Eakins, I think that a lot of people have, is they're looking at how good the San Diego Gulls are doing this year and expecting that to translate to the NHL, which isn't necessarily going to be true. The Gulls have a very good team. They have some players you could argue are NHL talents down there, in Kiefer Sherwood and Sam Steele and Max Jones and Tory Terry when they're down there, including Josh Mahura and now Kevin Boyle, who's up with the Ducks. A lot of these guys have seen NHL time this year, which is an invaluable experience when you're playing most of your season in the AHL. A lot of people think his system is similar to Randy Carlyle, and I think you run that risk. And the problem now with waiting until the offseason is you now sign this guy. You don't sign this guy to a 1-year deal, likely. You sign him to probably a 2- or 3-year deal and hope that he's going to be your new coach for the next few years. You now take that risk. You now have to assume that whoever you go with is a guy you're going to be comfortable with. And if you think it's Dallas Eakins, you just hope to God that his system isn't similar to Randy Carlyle's. And I haven't watched enough of the Gulls games to say this year to see if it is. I know you've probably seen more than I have. It's hard to pick out, but have you liked what you've seen from his play style in San Diego, or do you think it's too close to what the Ducks have already been playing like?
Well, I haven't watched a game in a while. I kind of took a break from hockey over like the All-Star break.
I don't blame you.
I needed to breathe a little bit. But, you know, I like what I've seen, and the one thing that I really admire about him is that I've heard, like, from numerous sources that he's the kind of coach who the players look up to, and I think that'll change the environment in Anaheim, and I think the players will be more appreciative, and I think they need an attitude like that, because this season it just kind of seems like they've given up, they don't care. And they're just, I don't even know.
Yeah, that's how most people feel, right? At this point, you're just kind of lost for words the way the Ducks have been playing this year, because nobody expected this. This is arguably one of the worst collapses by any team this year. The Ducks not only were supposed to be a playoff team, were probably supposed to be a team that finished second or third in their division. I don't think they were... A lot of people thought they were going to contend for the Pacific Division Championship this year, but still, they were a bank to be a playoff team. And not only have they been far from a playoff team, they're last in the Western Conference, which I didn't think would get anywhere close to happening. I believe there was a possibility they could have missed the playoffs, and even Patrick, as much as he likes to call himself a Ducks fan, predicted that the Ducks would miss out on the playoffs, but... Nobody expected this. Nobody expected it to be this bad, which is why it's so surprising and why the amount of craziness that's ensued in Ducks Nation this year has been centered around Randy Carlyle and him getting fired, and then how Bob Murray to complete the circus behind the bench. It's just been an insane year for the Ducks. Gordon Bombay in our YouTube chat says, what if they fire Bruce Boudreau in Minnesota, which is becoming close to be a possibility at this point, and Bob Murray rehires him? How would you feel if they went and did that?
I think we learned a good lesson this year. Never go back to your ex.
Yeah. The sad thing is, Minnesota today, we're up 4-1 against New Jersey. They ended up choking and losing that in overtime. And the general manager's already come out and said that any player is available pretty much from that team. If they keep doing bad and they miss the playoffs, there's a very good chance that Bruce Boudreau might get fired and becomes available. I can only imagine the reaction if they brought him back in. It just feels like such a Ducks move to do, though, because they did it with Randy Carlyle
Yes.
And Bob Murray just likes familiarity, and so do the owners to some extent as well. I can't see them doing it because of how bad this mistake was, but there's just that thought in the back of your head, like, this would be so them to do this.
Oh goodness.
I hope not. I couldn't take it. It'd be too much.
I don't know whether I'd laugh or I'd cry, honestly.
It'd be both, because that's what it's been all season. It's been a lot of laughing and crying pretty much the entire season for Ducks. I think it's been more laughing as of late because people have finally just accepted it and thought that, hey, you know what, this is how it's going to be. And we're all aboard the tank train until the Ducks won against Vancouver, and I think we've kind of all hopped back on a little bit. If I don't think anybody really hopped off after that 1-0 win. But if there was a little bit of hope because of the changes that were made, that's been squashed in today's game. But let's touch on the third part of your article, which is surprising because it's a tournament that doesn't get a lot of love. The IHF World Championship is going to be in Slovakia this year, and a tournament where we rarely get to see Ducks players participate in unless they get eliminated from the playoffs early. But if they're not even going to make the playoffs this year, there's a chance we see Hampus Lindholm and Rickard Rakell, maybe Jakob Silfverberg, among others, get a shot. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Tory Terry maybe get a call from Team USA because of his experience playing with them in the past, playing in the Olympics. There's a chance that sometimes they like to go back to those players. And if John Gibson is healthy, I'm sure he's getting a call from Team USA if he wants to participate in that. So that could actually be a tournament that's worth watching this year. And I believe Rickard Gronberg will be participating in that tournament for Team Sweden if his contract isn't up at that point. So there could be a lot riding on that tournament for Ducks fans to actually pay attention to this year.
Definitely. I'm really excited. I followed last year for the first time. I didn't get to watch any of the games, but I would follow along with the scores. And it was just a lot of fun, and it was really exciting after seeing the Ducks get swept in the first round of the playoffs to see Lindholm and Rakell win that gold and be able to celebrate something, because it's so hard when you were in a season where everybody was injured, it didn't look like you were going to make it, and then you make that last push at the end just to get knocked out. So I think it was very rewarding for them, and I think if the Ducks don't make it, it's going to be really exciting to see them play.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be at least a little bit of taste. You know, I think most people have kind of sold themselves on the thought that the Ducks aren't going to make the playoffs this year. But if you get to watch them in a tournament where it's not as painful because it's not the Ducks just losing game after game after game, you actually get to see them excel on a very good team. I think that will be a little bit better to watch. But the next thing you bring up is another tournament that a lot of people look forward to, especially myself, is the rookie tournament and Ducks Camp. Eventually, that will be later on in the offseason, closer to next season. But I think this is such a big deal because this will probably be the Ducks' next look, or Ducks fans' next look at Maxime Comtois since his start to the season with the Ducks. He'll be in the QMJHL this year. He'll likely make a long playoff run, so the Ducks won't get to see him at the end of the season. And same goes for Isac Lundestrom, who maybe potentially could have got a spot with the Ducks near the end of the season, depending on how his team in Sweden did. But he just suffered a concussion, so there's no idea if he's going to be coming back this year. So it could be our first look in over 8 months at looking at Maxime Comtois and Isac Lundestrom. So I think that in itself is a more exciting thing, and then just seeing the progression from guys like Sam Steele and Max Jones and Tory Terry as well.
Definitely. You know, it's kind of hard sometimes to kind of evaluate them properly because they are playing against other rookies. It's not like they're playing against NHL teams.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you watch them and you see how they've progressed over the year. And it's like last year, I mean, Kiefer Sherwood kind of came out of nowhere and just impressed the heck out of everybody.
Yeah.
And it's just exciting to see players take that next step. And when you watch them, you realize, okay, the future in Anaheim is bright. You know, it's not like we're going to be suffering like we are this season for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, the Ducks realistically are on a good track when it comes to a retool. They've got a lot of good young prospects coming up. They're just missing that elite guy, and whether they get him this year or get closer to that step and maybe you're bad again next year, just waiting a little bit more on that transition. It's not going to be Edmonton Oilers, Toronto Maple Leafs-esque rebuild where the Ducks are bad for 25 years. It's I don't think, I would hope not, and I don't think it would get to that point because the Ducks have a lot of good young pieces in place. I mean, essentially, they've got their goaltender for the next 10 years. Their blue line is pretty much set. They could tweak some things with that if they want, but they've got at least 3 guys that are going to be mainstays for this team the next time they're competitive, and then all their young forwards are on their way up and will likely be ready to play and competing at a high level in the NHL right after all of the big contracts come off the books. So they're primed to be in a good position. What sets it up for the last point you had was looking forward to new faces, trades and new acquisitions, whether it be in free agency or in the draft, on who could be with the Ducks next year. There isn't a lot of room. There's a lot of guys who are still in the books that are going to be here next year, but the possibility of maybe Jakob Silfverberg isn't here, if they go out and trade Adam Henrique or Josh Manson, or even if they go get guys in free agency, I think that's always an exciting thing for Ducks fans, right, is to look forward to who's going to be a new player for the team. And no matter who it is, whether it's Brian Gibbons or Carter Rowney, there's always a little bit of hype that gets generated in the offseason.
Yeah, I definitely think that Bob Murray kind of owes us one from all the horrible acquisitions he made this last offseason, like Andre Schuster and Luke Shen and all them. Yeah,
exactly. It was not many of them panned out. Carter Rowney, I'd have to say he's been okay, but giving him a 2-year deal, it doesn't really hurt the Ducks, but it was a little bit interesting. But Brian Gibbons, as much as I thought that could be a good signing, I will admit that it really hasn't panned out, and that's resulted in him being put on waivers and likely just going to either ride the bench and be a healthy scratch or get sent down to San Diego, whatever they end up choosing. But hasn't worked out for him, and even the new acquisitions in Del Zotto didn't think that was going to work out, and it hasn't either. So it's been tough. It's been tough because not much has worked out for Bob Murray, but he really hasn't gone and swung for the fences and tried to make big deals. He's basically played it safe to the point where if it didn't pan out, the Ducks didn't give up anything big. They gave up Luke Shen in a 7th round pick for Del Zotto, and you get a minor improvement in Del Zotto, but nothing big. So that 7th round pick isn't going to come back to hurt you likely. The Ducks have some good records in drafting in the 7th round, getting Andre Kasha, but you can't rely on that. Be like, oh yeah, never give up a 7th round pick because we picked Andre Kasha. It's just, it was a weird trade to begin with, but it just, a lot of them haven't panned out. I guess really the only one that has been Derek Grant, because he's been a welcome addition back to the Ducks.
Which I have to eat my words, because when I heard about us getting Derek Grant back, I was not very happy. Sorry, Jake.
Yeah, I was on the fence because it didn't give up a lot to get him. It wasn't a big deal. It was just Joseph Blandisi, and that was it. So that's fine with me. It's not like it was a draft pick or something that's going to hurt them long term down the road. But yeah, you didn't expect any big sort of production wise, and he hasn't been putting up the points. He's actually been just more of a reliable 2-way guy, and I think that's almost been more valuable in a sense to the Ducks, even though they've been bad. But he's kind of taken over that spot from Ryan Kessler, which Adam Henrique had kind of failed to do, and they weren't going to give that responsibility to Ryan Getzlaf. So I think that was probably the best move he's made this season. But that's saying something when the best move you've made in a bad season is bringing in Derek Grant to help your defense.
Now, my question is, are they going to re-sign him in the offseason, or are they going to let him walk again?
See, I made the mistake last time where I said, oh, for sure they're going to bring him back. He seemed to work well with his team. He gelled. He was actually putting up points. He seemed to fit with the style the Anaheim Ducks were playing, and they let him walk. And he didn't make much money to go to Pittsburgh. He made, I think, just over $1 million, which the Ducks easily could have brought back into the system. So I don't want to go out on a limb and say that they're going to do it again, because right now you would think they would bring him back. But I think it all depends on what they end up doing with Adam Henrique, if they decide to trade him or not. And because you're going to have Getzlaf and Kessler at the middle next year. And if you want Sam Steele to take that jump, maybe you don't bring back Derek Grant and make that a spot that blocks a guy like Sam Steele getting a chance next year, because realistically you want Steele to play center and not on the wing. And if you bring back Grant and you don't trade Adam Henrique, you've got those same 4 guys up the middle, and there's not a lot of room unless you shift the only guy that can go from center to wing in Adam Henrique. So, yeah, it's tough. There's merit to bringing him back, but if they don't, it's not like it's something that's going to really hurt their chances of either being good or bad next year.
That's very true.
A lot of people don't want to hear that, but because Adam Henrique is the elite number 1C, so it's tough to hear that he isn't making a massive impact on this team. But he's been reliable. I guess that's what you can say, which is all you can ask from a guy like Derek Grant.
Yeah.
Recently, some trade rumors and some updates in general have been jumping back up into surrounding the Ducks, I guess you could say, which makes sense because the deadline is only 9 days away now. So it's getting pretty close, but Silfverberg has been the biggest name of discussion, rightfully so, because he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. And the updates we've been looking at is there was a couple of reporters who had mentioned a couple different things, where Silfverberg is apparently looking for 5 years. The Ducks, if they're going to resign him, don't want to go for more than 4. And Silfverberg's also looking for around $6 million. I want to get your take on it because we've discussed this heavily on the podcast over the last few shows that don't think it's a good idea necessarily to bring Jakob Silfverberg back for 5 years at over $5 to $6 million when he's going to be 33 by the time this deal is done, and likely the Ducks aren't going to be competitive for the next 3 years. What are your take on that? Do you want them to bring back Silfverberg? Do you think they even should try to bring him back?
I really hope my dad doesn't hear me because he loves Silfverberg. But honestly, I mean, he's probably not going to be making as much as like Getzlaf or Perry. But we don't want to be in that similar situation where we sign a player into his like mid-30s for a ton of money that we can't really afford to spend, and then like have him not work out or have him prone to injury or just go on this steady decline.
Yeah. We've seen that too often, right? Where they sign the guys, some older guys, to long-term contracts, and then the Ducks get stuck into these deals that it really is affecting what they can do in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to see them in a similar situation with like Kessler, where if like, because I mean, like Bob Murray hands out no movement clauses or no trade clauses like candy. It's just like Halloween. But I don't want to see them in that situation where they're like, okay, well, this didn't pan out, so we're going to ask him to waive it, and then he's just like, no.
Yeah, and the big problem, the big recent problem with guy not waiving his no-move clause was Kevin Bieksa at the expansion draft, where apparently the Ducks didn't ask him anyway, but he wasn't going to waive it even if they did ask him. That's, Exhibit A for the guy you don't give a no movement clause to is a player like Kevin Bieksa. It's understandable to give it to Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry at the time because of the way they were producing, and even right now it still makes sense for those guys to have no move clauses. But when you're handing them out, like you said, like candy to guys who don't necessarily deserve it, that's where you get into problems. And even contracts just in general. I mean, Adam Henrique getting his extension at almost $6 million at 28 years old is a tough one to kind of justify at this point. It made sense at the time to bring him over from New Jersey, but to sign him to a 5-year deal when, a lot of us knew this window was likely going to close either this year or next year, and then you would have a guy at 30 for the next 3 years signed almost $6 million, which puts you in a tough position. And with the Seattle expansion draft coming up, I know he doesn't have a no move clause, so they don't have to worry about that, but it still presents a situation where you just gave this guy all this money, and now you might lose him for nothing, or you might have to keep him, and it will restrict you from bringing in any new free agents or any new acquisitions later on.
Exactly.
So it's tough. And Adam Henrique is actually a guy whose his name has come back up. He was listed on TSN's trade bait board about a couple weeks ago, and now Craig Custance in his trade board in The Athletic said that Adam Henrique, I think, was number 16 of the 24s he thought could be moved at the deadline. He specifically said, and it was a quote from an NHL executive, that said Henrique's contract is, quote, heavy and would complicate trade talks. I mean, I think everybody can see that, right? It's a tough contract to move. You gotta really like the guy and expect to be a team that at least for 3 seasons will be able to compete and be a cup contender with him on your team, and he'll make you that much better. and you're likely, if you're the Ducks, you're bringing back some salary in return for a contract that team's looking to get rid of. But if you're Bob Murray at this point, would you explore moving Adam Henrique? Do you think it's a good idea? Like, I know he still has value to this team, but when you look at the direction the Ducks are going in, is it worth keeping him around?
Honestly, as much as I like him, he's not like a player that's going to make or break the Ducks.
Yeah.
So I could see them trying to move him, but I mean, I think it's definitely going to be difficult. I was talking to one of the site experts over at our sister page for the New Jersey Devils, and we're like, well, the Ducks and the Devils haven't made their annual trade yet.
It's coming.
We're actually going to do a collaboration on like trade deadline ideas. So if you guys have any ideas of like any players you guys want from New Jersey, like send me a message on Twitter and I can try and make it happen.
I definitely think the Ducks should do Cam Fowler for Taylor Hall 1-for-1 again. Let's just let's complete it full circle. The Ducks, Taylor Hall just seems to always be involved in trades that are horrible, and it's 1-for-1 for a defenseman. So why not throw Cam Fowler into the mix? I mean, right now, you know, New Jersey-wise, Taylor Hall, I mean, that's the big name, but he's not going to get traded. But, you know, another favorite from Ducks fans is Cal Palmieri. Wouldn't make sense to bring in right now, but how much better would the Ducks be if they ended up keeping him around and having a consistent 20 to 30 goal scorer, and how much of a difference that would have made, not just this year, but going into some of the playoff runs they made.
Yeah.
We all miss him, but moving into some of the fan questions we have, and one of them revolves around Cam Fowler. It's from A-Love on Instagram. They said, why does this team continue to hold on to Fowler? He's garbage. What are your thoughts on Cam Fowler? And I you know, a lot of fans are split on him. Are you of the mindset to keep him around and help build around him on defense, or do you think maybe his time is up in Anaheim?
Well, this is a difficult question for me because Cam Fowler is the reason that I started watching the Ducks. I'm actually wearing my Cam Fowler jersey right now.
Oh, it's a loaded answer coming.
But I kind of feel like we're at the point where it's time to move on. I know he's been like, everybody's like, oh, he's groomed to be the next captain of the Ducks, which I actually wrote an article about that today. So if you want to go check it out, go read it. But I think it's time for the Ducks to explore other options because every season he just seems to keep getting worse and worse. And we're stuck with him for the next however many seasons. I don't know how much longer his contract is, but I think it's time for the Ducks to just cut their losses and move on.
Yeah, he's starting the new 8-year deal that is going to take him into his early to late 30s or mid 30s, I guess you could say, with this team. And now he, just past Scotty for most, or sorry, just past Roussan Saleh for most games played by Ducks defensemen. It's a tough sell at this point, where with that milestone and just with how much people still believe Cam means to this team, and how much I guess other teams really love what Cam Fowler still does, because up until this year he was still one of the best skating defensemen in the league. He was one of the most efficient at zone exits, and then this year, as most of the Ducks had, he's just taken a huge step backwards. Yeah. And what used to be a strength from him has been a weakness, and the things that were weaknesses for him in the past have become glaring weaknesses this year. And it's been a tough year. And, if you sell now, you're probably selling low. You'll still get a lot for him. It all depends, in my opinion, on what you think either you're going to get in the next couple of drafts as defensemen, because the Ducks have really dried up their well when it comes to prospect defensemen, or it's what you think Josh Mahura is going to turn into, right? I think that's the main thing. If you think Josh Mahura in the next couple seasons can get somewhere close to what Cam Fowler can give you, then if you get a deal that wows you, then I think maybe it's the right direction to kind of move on from him. Yeah, and I mean, you never know. I feel bad for the guy because he's never really had a stable partner. Yeah. I mean, this season, I don't understand the whole splitting up Manson and Lindholm and Montour and Fowler thing, but I mean, it's Randy Carlyle, so it doesn't surprise me. But I don't know, maybe if he had a little more consistency and he had a partner that was of a similar caliber, he might improve. But as of right now,
I'm kind of torn.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, because you're right in the sense that if they can find him the right partner, he succeeds. But the problem has always been finding Cam Fowler that right partner, because if you don't, he doesn't succeed. And he's been with some very bad defensemen in Ducks history, whether it be Kevin Bieksa or Francois Beauchemin or Ben Lovejoy. It's been a tough go early on in Cam Fowler's career, but then they put him with Brandon Montour last year, and it worked out well. I mean, it was a small sample size, but they seemed to do really well together, and complemented the fact that the Ducks had one of the best defense pairings in the league in Lindholm and Manson. Funny enough that Lindholm and Manson are now back together, but still Fowler and Montour have only been together, I think, for one game this year, which was against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they decided to go with Del Zotto instead, and Bob Murray's gone back to what we saw where they were splitting up Fowler and Montour before and playing Fowler with Bieksa and Montour with Beauchemin. They've gone back to that, which never worked for the Ducks to begin with. But yeah, it's tough because Cam might not get that partner here. We all thought Josh Manson was going to be that guy. He seemed like he'd be the guy that would directly complement Cam Fowler the best. And it's been just a complete disaster this year for both of them. And it's not just that the Ducks are bad. They just saw, for some reason, as good as it looks on paper that they should work together, for some reason they just don't. And the Ducks are running out of options on who to put him with at this point. You can't play him with Hampus Lindholm, and you've tried him with pretty much everybody else. Maybe, again, the only other option they have, which I'm surprised they haven't done yet, is to put him back with Brandon Montour and see how things work out. I would, before I'm sold on moving Cam Fowler, that's what I want to see for at least another 15 to 20 game stretch, is those two together to see if they can find any bit of semblance on what they used to have.
I totally agree. I think somebody should send this podcast to Bob Murray and he should take notes.
Yeah, well, Patrick apparently meets him every other week at Starbucks. So apparently Pat will get that covered for us. But that nearly wraps up the show. We are going to be back, or I guess I shouldn't say we, because neither of us will be on the next show. It'll be Pat and Jason who will be back on Sunday for the Ducks versus the Washington Capitals, which will be an interesting game, to say the least, when the leading goal scorer in the league comes into town in Alex Ovechkin. That will be a tough one. What do you think quickly is going to happen in that game? What are your predictions for that game against the Capitals?
Well, I'm not holding my breath, but last time we played them, we had an amazing comeback. But with the state of the Ducks right now, they're going to need to work some miracles if they want to win this one. But, I hope for the sake of Scott Niedermayer they do.
Yeah.
But, they blew it on Paul Kariya night, so...
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, is, they blew it on Paul Kariya night against Buffalo Sabres, and now you're going into a stretch where the Ducks are worse than they were then, and you're going against the Washington Capitals, who's defending Stanley Cup champions, and Alex Ovechkin, who everybody thought was going to slow down this year, clearly hasn't, so... It will be an interesting matchup. I hope they come out and at least just play similar to what they did in this game, where they at least show some fight, some compete. It wasn't perfect, but it was a better game. So, at this point of the season, with the way the Ducks have played, that's all you can kind of hope for, is that they just kind of remain in it. If you subscribe to wanting them to tank, which I understand, and I'm partially part of that too, because I would really love Jack Hughes, it still is nice to see them compete and at least be somewhat in games, where it's not 4-0 after the first period, and the rest of the game is just not fun to watch whatsoever.
Yeah, definitely.
So definitely check that out on Sunday. We also, if you haven't checked it out, do now a podcast over at pucksforfeather.com, and we will be releasing a new one on Monday. Pat and Jason, again, because I'm heading back home for the next week, we'll be recording that together, and that will be out on the website on Monday, so make sure to check it out. As Ciara and I mentioned earlier today, or earlier in the podcast, is Ciara has 2 new articles out on pucksforfeather.com, so go check those out. We mentioned the 5 reasons Anaheim Ducks fans can look forward to the offseason, and the who should be the Anaheim Ducks next captain, so make sure you guys go check those out on the website and give them a quick read, and stay tuned there for any new articles and any new podcasts we put out every Monday. If you haven't, Check us out on Twitch. We occasionally stream on there. We're working on some logistics to do a trade deadline show on the Monday, the 25th. Right now, I'm the only one slotted for that show, but Jason might be joining me because it's a tough one on a Monday morning for a lot of people who work. But no matter what, we'll be live, even if it's just me. We'll probably be, for the final 3 hours of trade deadline day, we'll be live. So if it's Eastern time, it's noon to 3. If you're Pacific time and you really want to get up that early, it'll be 9 to noon. If you want to catch us at any point during that, we'll be talking about obviously things that go on with the Ducks, but just trades in general, because it's primed to be a pretty interesting trade deadline this year with some of the big names that are available. And last but certainly not least, check out coolhockey.com. They are the sponsors of For Everybody 3 Stars, which we do before every game. If you haven't heard of it, which I'm sure you have because we plug it into every show, it's a contest where you make 3 predictions before each game. You get points on our leaderboard, and the person who has the most points at the end of the month wins a jersey from Cool Hockey. And, of course, the jersey that has been most popular this year is the Ducks' 3rd jersey. And I got word earlier today that they will have them back in stock in about a week or 2. So that means our December and January winners will finally be getting their jerseys. And anybody who wins it from February, March, and I believe April will have a chance at getting that jersey too. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I know it was a tough one. I know it was disappointing again to chalk up another loss. But as we said, we will be back for Sunday against the Washington Capitals. And again, I want to thank you, Ciara, for coming on. And I guess let's just say covering Pat's ass because he was doing other things tonight, but that's okay.
Oh, goodness. It was a pleasure to be on.
All right, guys. Talk to you later. We'll see you on Sunday.
Have a good night.
Thanks for ruining my show, by the way. That's it. I'm sorry you guys had to sit through that, but this is an obligation, contract obligation, they told me. So my kneecaps are sweating and I really got to go to the bathroom. So I'm going to have to let you guys go. Thank you. Bye.